In this podcast series, today we have Advitya with us, and I'm very happy to share his part of the story, his struggles, his achievements. And Aditya, stage is all yours. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Praneeth. I think I've been following your content since last fall, so it's probably been about 9 months now. So excited to chat with you now. My name is Advitya. I currently am a ML engineer at Microsoft. So I had done my undergrad in data science from UC San Diego. And I graduated in 2021, and I've been working with Microsoft since then. So it's been about 3 years now. And in my job, for the first 2 years, I was initially in a rotational program.
Mhm.
So I got to work with four different orgs across Microsoft for 6 months each on different kinds of ML projects. I got done with that program last summer. And since then, I have joined like a permanent team. And since last year, I have been working in the area of responsible AI and AI safety. Last year, I was working on image models or vision models. And this year, I'm working on our AI tools for large language models. That's my intro in a nutshell.
No, that's great because like AI is a buzzword, right? For most of us, not for you because you understand it, you code it, but for most of us, like, AI is like, okay, well, this is something which will help maybe remove our jobs, maybe keep our jobs and help us do better at it. So, like, what is responsible AI to start with? Like, is it something that will be more coincidental, or what's the idea behind it?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's a pretty broad umbrella term
Mm,
related to like how do we develop AI in a way that's safe, fair, reliable,
mm,
and doesn't encode human biases or
right.
does not hurt unintentionally the consumers who are using it,
Right.
right? So it's basically like kind of just a term just to describe like safe and reliable development of AI.
Right.
And within that, there are multiple pillars in a way in
Mm,
terms of how AI could be developed responsibly. It could be all from interpretability of models to judging fairness towards different groups of data,
mhm,
towards even other areas like evaluation and monitoring of these AI systems.
mm.
Uh, that's what this like kind of term is broadly about. And I have also been kind of contributing in like certain areas of responsible AI as well.
That's great. And I think maybe we should have one episode only for AI where I think your
Yeah.
knowledge is really, really helpful, at least for me, to learn about it and see how AI is kind of uh, getting better and better day per day. And I think with ChatGPT, I think we most of us might now have used ChatGPT. Like even when I was talking to my parents the other day, were like, "Oh, I've used ChatGPT now." It's like that's
Yeah.
great. So what we were searching is like, okay, we can search for anything in ChatGPT and it gives an answer. So it's I think it has that kind of flair now, and people are loving it in terms of in day-to-day use. So that's great to hear. And I think responsible AI kind of takes us to that thing where that you talked about the biases, right? So when you talk about the biases, is that something that is you code and you know what biases it should look out for, or how does it understand? Like just to get a little bit more understanding before we go into your details of your stories and your journey.
Of course, yeah. Biases in these models is of course like a very like long-standing and complicated problem because a lot of the data that these models are trained on is obviously generated by humans, right? And humans have inherent biases.
Mm,
So oftentimes what happens is that these biases kind of get encoded in the models because these models are basically detecting patterns
right.
from large amounts of data that we are creating, right? So this can have like really real life consequences, Praneeth. Like,
Mm,
for example, if there might be a bank who might be using AI to detect to estimate how much of interest rate to charge for giving someone a loan, say, given their credit history and other kinds of details.
mhm,
I believe there have been real life instances where people of underrepresented communities, turns out, would be getting higher interest rates, even with the same credit history and things like that.
Right.
There have also been other instances where even the models released by, say, large tech companies would output something bad, would even kind of overcorrect its results to display like factually inaccurate results. And sometimes the models would just say something bad or kind of like advocate for doing something bad.
Right.
And that can have real life consequences,
Mm.
not just on people who are using these models, but also, of course, on the image and reputation of large companies who
Right.
actually want to build trustworthy AI systems that people can like use and rely upon.
Right.
So in terms of how this is corrected, right? So there's a variety of like approaches and tricks that
Mm.
are used to at various steps of the process to actually check for bias and kind of correct these things.
Mm.
On the training side, there might be sanitization methods that might be applied to data,
Mm.
see if any existing biases can be can be like mitigated in terms of on the user side, when the user sends an input to the model, or when the model generates something, there
Right.
can also be filters applied to those parts of the process to wet the input of the user and to also wet what the model has generated
Right.
for, say, some list or set of biases as well. There
Right.
could be other models under the hood, other like bias detection models to also like wet and sanitize the output before it gets out to the user. So there's a whole bunch of these tricks applied at all stages of the process
Right.
in these AI systems. Yeah.
That's good. That's very good to know because I know machine learning. I'm using it, but AI is something that I want to also learn and get more familiar with. So that's great. Uh, Now switching gears, coming to your story, right? I think that was a good start in terms of learning what AI and how you are kind of putting your efforts into that, specifically the responsible AI. And I think one part of it is connected to our biases, right? For example, the data or the information that we get on the internet, right? That leads to a lot of decisions we make. And I think that's why I asked that question of how these biases are corrected. Because let's say, and I think you mentioned that you came here after your 12th, right, from India, and you did your bachelor's here. So you must be looking at the internet, trying to find information on what is the best school, where to go. Is bachelor's a good idea or master's a good idea, or should I just stay in India and maybe develop a career? Like there are a lot of questions that people get, right? And the best source they found is internet, like do their research, come up with a solution, or maybe go to an agency or some kind of a consultancy where they can get more answers, right? So, what was that process? Let's start with that.
Yeah. So yeah, let me share a bit of the backstory.
Mhm.
It was actually not my decision to
Oh,
come to the US. It was my parents' decision. Yeah.
that's good.
So
Good to know.
yeah. So just to like get more specific into it, like I went to Fiji from the eighth grade to the 12th grade.
Oh,
For your
like IIT.
viewers, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So for your viewers who might not know what Fiji is, it's like a tutoring center
right,
preparing you for entrance exams in India. And there's multiple tutoring centers like these all across India.
right.
So I personally went to Fiji from eighth grade to 12th grade.
Wow.
Uh, what seemed to be clear in my head, or more specifically, my parents' head, because they were making all these decisions for me, was that I basically do my undergrad somewhere in India, and then I perhaps come here to pursue my master's, right? Which is a pretty conventional pathway. Um, and so what happened was in the 11th grade, my dad came home from the office one day. He had an A4 paper on his hand with handwritten notes on what the foreign admissions process is, which he got from a colleague whose kid had gone to Berkeley.
Okay.
And he just like gave me that paper and be like, you're going to apply abroad. Like, okay, so what about India? What about Fiji? I'm like, yeah,
Right,
just do both. I'm like,
right,
I can't do both. The application processes are very different. I
right,
can do whatever you want me to do, but like you're gonna have to give one thing to me. Like you're gonna have to like choose one.
right,
So he's like, yeah, just apply abroad. I'm like, okay. And this was a part where I asked him like for verbal consent. Like, I'm gonna need explicit consent, yes or no. Like, yes, you're going to apply abroad. And so
right,
that is how I guess in the 11th grade, then I kind of started to work on my application.
right,
Uh, the good part was that I had already done several activities in the 10th grade, especially. So I
Hmm.
have a lot of experience in terms of participating in different things and getting certificates and a couple of awards here and there.
Right.
So in a way, it just so happened that my profile was also aligned in that direction as well.
Nice. And I think that leads to a very interesting section, right? Because I also did the took the coaching in resonance. You might have heard of
Oh,
it. It's in Kota.
of
So
course.
Kota, the birthplace of the IIT coaching, and like we have Kota Factory now on Netflix, which kind of
Yeah.
really shares the true picture, like close to a true picture, I would say. So like for Fiji, I think Fiji is in Delhi, right? So were you in Delhi that time or
Yeah, so I believe they have branches in multiple
yeah,
cities. They have branches in Delhi, and at the time they had one branch in Gurgaon. So I was raised in Gurgaon,
got
which is next to New Delhi. It's in the NCR,
it.
National Capital Region
Right.
area.
Right. No, I think it's interesting because, like, I think you're right. So parents have a very big, uh, let's say, blessing in terms of what you're gonna do, right?
Mhm.
Because there are multiple reasons. Maybe financially, they will gonna help you pay your fees, right? Because you're not earning, you're not working, so you need their blessing to do whatever you want to pursue as your first, like, bachelor's, or maybe in future, maybe your master's and stuff. So I think I can relate to it because it's a very similar story with mine. Like I did my 12th and I was like, okay, I'll up do all these engineering exams. I gave all of them. Didn't have much of a success. So I was like, okay, what should I do now? So my parents said, why don't you go to Kota? Like everyone goes there, you should try. And I went to Kota. I was there for a year and I faced the worst of the worst health problems that one can imagine because of the water or maybe the food or whatever it is. Like I didn't survive it the way I should. So I think that's why I was like, when you went to Fiji, like I can understand that pressure because you're doing your school. Fiji has its own courses or maybe other coaching centers have, and they're very focused. They are like, you have to crack IIT, right? That's their aim. But apart from that, you have to also do your school, get good grades, because let's say if you want to go to abroad, they
Yeah.
will not look at your IIT coaching, they'll look at your grades. So how did you manage that? Like that must be tough.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Praneeth. It was a very interesting challenge because from my school, hardly anyone was even applying abroad, let
Hmm.
alone the US.
Right.
Even teachers weren't aware of what the process might precisely be, right? And through no fault of their own, of course, most of the people in my high school, which was a CBSE high school, were naturally applying for colleges in India. So it
Hmm.
was, in a way, my job to kind of educate them or let them know on what the process is and what I'm going to require and what my prioritization is going to look like.
Hmm.
So I was basically dealing with, I think, three major stakeholders at the same time.
Hmm.
One was my school, in terms of like performing in school and all that. And I guess they prioritized board exams at the time. The
Yeah.
second was Fiji, because I still continued Fiji, actually. I still did it till the 12th grade. And the third one was basically my foreign admissions process and the admissions counselor that I had hired for
Hmm.
applying abroad. And
Wow.
so the way that I balance these stakeholders, right, is I guess by like selective prioritization. What
Right.
I mean by this is for Fiji, I specifically made sure to only study the content that is going to help me do well on my school exams,
Got it.
because that's what my priority was.
Right.
On the school side, of course, I would take my school exams very seriously, but
Hmm.
I'd also communicate to teachers that, hey, I'm taking a lot of holidays from
Right.
school because I have to give the SAT or the ACT or TOEFL, these kinds of exams, or
Right.
I'm volunteering at some NGO, for example, right? So even though like it took time to like kind of really make them understand and appreciate that, but it was still my job to kind of like gradually let them know that my prioritizations are slightly different from most other people. That's another thing. And then for on the foreign admission side, of course, I was working with my counselor to also see how I can bridge the gaps in my application, what additional activities that I could do. In my case, I had a massive struggle with giving the SATs and ACTs and all these exams, and
Right.
that is another standalone topic. And so for that, they also kind of encouraged me to beef up the other parts in my application, right? To compensate for that, things like that.
Right.
So that is how I kind of prioritize these stakeholders. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to put it because stakeholders is something that we learn in industry, right? Okay, we have
Yeah.
stakeholders, each stakeholder get their priorities done, report to them. And I think that's a great way to put it in context with the way one is like going through this 11th, 12th, like understanding whether they want to get into IIT or maybe another school in India or maybe go abroad. So I
Mhm.
think that's a really great way to put it. I think that kind of wants me to go a little bit more deeper into your background, right? Because I think family bias, right? We started with biases in AI. And
Yeah.
I think that's something I wanted to bring up in this topic. That our upbringing, our family bias generally pushes us into a certain direction, right? And
Mhm.
I think it's true for most of the part across the world, right? We have seen this happening. Now, now definitely there is a shift. Now parents want the child to take their own decisions, understand what they want to do and stuff. But backing up to the part when we are growing up or growing up when we were in our, let's say, teens, we had this bias that, okay, my father is an engineer, my mother is an engineer, or maybe a doctor. Okay, I want to pursue a very similar field.
Yeah.
So, what was your story in that case? Like, was that bias there? Was your family into engineering and they wanted to pursue that? Or how was it altogether?
Yeah, I think you captured it super accurately, Praneeth. So I wanted to be a lawyer, actually.
Wow.
Because my dad was a lawyer.
Okay.
He's a corporate lawyer,
Hmm.
and I was just like, of course, like I looked at him like a role model,
Right.
right? And there's also these like typical Indian notions that oh, everyone's scared of lawyers and lawyers are super hardcore and all that. And I actually did Model UN in high school as well. So I really got interested in Model UN. I did a bunch of conferences. I
Wow.
also kind of learned like what it takes to construct an argument, regardless of whatever your personal beliefs are, and how
Right.
do you represent a certain set of ideas, no
Hmm.
matter how different those ideas, how foreign those ideas might seem to you.
Hmm.
So I personally wanted to be a lawyer just in terms of pure interest
Right.
came to actually deciding. So I think my dad was also, of course, like very on board with this idea that I can definitely like go to law school.
Right.
Um, I think my mom wanted me to be an engineer,
Okay.
and she won that argument
Right.
with the reasoning that it's like very like core Indian mentality, which I don't know if foreign viewers of your channel might understand, but her reasoning was that an engineering undergrad is supposed to be the most prestigious kind of an undergrad. If you pursue engineering, if you take
Right.
science and pursue engineering,
True.
then you can do whatever you want to do. So even if you want to become a lawyer after pursuing engineering, you could do that.
Yeah.
So compared to a law undergrad versus an engineering undergrad, the engineering undergrad is most prestigious. So let's do that, and then we can focus on whatever you want to do,
Right.
considering yourself are also not completely clear on what you want to do.
True.
And unlike I guess today's time, back in the day, like I definitely had zero decision making capability, right? I just totally conformed to whatever my parents wanted for me because I myself did not have clarity in
Right.
terms of what I want to do or what I should do.
Right. No, that's a great way to put it, because I think that tells us that your mother is a better lawyer at home compared to your father. Argument, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's in the sense of just understanding the situation, but definitely that's a. I think it happens like in our family. If I have to tell you, my grandfather was an engineer. My father was an engineer. My mother was a homemaker, and it was kind of aligned from the birth that okay, this guy has to do engineering.
Like
Like
the three idiots scene that as soon as you were born, your dad was basically like you're going to be an engineer.
right. And my father graduated from my IIT. So
Yeah.
that thing was also there, like, okay, you have to at least try for it. Like if you don't get it, that's completely fine. So instead of IIT, I did VIT, which is again has some IT in it. But but yeah, that pressure is always there, right? Because you have to kind of understand that though the family doesn't maybe putting out expectations out loud, but somewhere in your mind, you build up that and you have
Mhm.
to live up to that, right?
Yeah.
So when I went to Kota, coming back to that Kota story, it's like, oh man, I want to get out of this place. It's not working out for me. And then my father and mother, like they had to come there, live with me for some time because I was going through a horrible state.
Mhm.
And that I think that kind of told them as well, like maybe this is not meant for him.
Mhm.
Maybe he wants to do something else. And then I gave another exam, cracked that, went to VIT, did my bachelor's, and then came to US for my master's. So I think I can relate to your story. I can see how that perception build up, and then you have to do something which your family doesn't maybe force you, but that ideology kind of helps you take that decision at that time. So let's say, okay, you took the decision, you came here. So what was that process? I think a lot of people, sometimes maybe international students also watching this podcast, because they are also in that same league. Okay, I'm going to finish my 12th pretty soon, or maybe next year, or maybe I'm in my 11th. I have to figure out what I want to do, whether I want to go for coaching or an IIT or some Indian institute, or should I go to abroad. So once everything was decided for you, what
Mhm.
was that process of finding a person who can help you? Was it a consulting company, or was it something that you did on your own? How did that research work for you?
Yeah. So we basically decided in the 11th grade,
Okay,
started the 11th grade in the summer that I'm going to apply abroad.
right.
Then I started giving the SATs. So
Mm,
I went to a particular institute just for preparing for the SATs.
got it. Mm,
And I gave two attempts and I just did not get a good score. Like I had massive challenges with like academic English, especially critical reading and all that.
right.
And
Okay.
so then that happened. And then after that, I think in the summer of my 12th grade, which is actually kind of late, like you ideally, I guess, want to perhaps join in the 11th grade itself, but in the summer
Right.
of the 12th grade, I then joined, my dad kind of then made me join a consulting, like a
Oh,
consultancy
got
for
it.
applying abroad. So
Mm,
there were some consultancy services in the New Delhi area.
mm.
And so I got connected with one of them. They had one small office in Gurgaon, but they had a much bigger office in New Delhi. So I'd also commute to New Delhi along with Fiji, to also like interface with the teachers and coaches there
Right.
for preparing abroad. And so then they kind of also encouraged me to give like two attempts of the ACT to try that out. Did
Okay.
not get a super great score, but like yeah, just like very baseline performance. And they then kind of also helped me on the other parts of my application related to choosing the right fit colleges, kind of prioritizing the timelines of when I should be applying,
Yes.
essay writing, of course, and how to actually craft a good and compelling story
Makes
from
sense.
my experience, things like that. Yeah.
Right. That's good to know. And I think, how many colleges did you apply for? Like, I think they have, like, when I was preparing for this master's onboarding, and then I also joined a consult. I forgot the name. It was some. I think it was also in New Delhi, but I'm
Mhm.
not remembering the name now. But they had this list: the dream colleges, the
Yeah,
best
dreams, matches,
colleges,
and beauty.
and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay to go to this college kind of list, right? So
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
there a list for you as well, like dreams?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So they definitely made me research on a bunch of colleges. They
Mm,
made me classify colleges in terms of dreams, matches, and safety. I
right.
had two safety colleges, probably three or four dream colleges, and then like three or four match colleges.
Mm,
In total, I had applied to 13 colleges, with four colleges in Canada, which
okay,
are basically the top four ranked colleges in terms of QS Word rankings.
got it.
And the rest of the colleges were in the US.
Okay.
And pretty much, I guess one of the ways that I also decided was also considering the ranking in mind.
Right.
Just because like otherwise it would be difficult to convince my parents
Right.
the college is worth applying for. And
Right.
like when I got my offers, both from the US and Canada, at one point, the Canadian colleges that I got into was the best offer that I had. And
Okay.
my parents were just not convinced that sending me to Canada is a good option simply because the colleges in Canada is like very traditional Indian
Right.
mentality, despite the good rankings and all that.
Yeah.
So that's also like a really interesting kind of dynamic to navigate,
True.
as I'm also trying to work with my counselor and make these decisions and make sure that my parents are also on board with.
Yeah. That's a tough vote. So, and I think, so you did your bachelor's from UC San Diego, right? So was it in your dream list? Was it in your matched list or safety list? Where was it?
Great question. Yeah. UCSD was a match college for me.
Right.
And I think I had very average performance in terms of the offers that I got. I'm not saying this is good or bad, it's just
Right.
exactly average. I
Great.
got into my CP schools. I got into half of my math schools, got rejected in the other half of math schools and all the dream schools. So
Right.
it was very average, expected performance. Uh,
Right. So
and
expected and observed were kind of matching. So what you expected was matching with your observed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're probably spot on with my college list. But so it was a match college. And I think it was one of the better match colleges as well, because of both the prestige of the college, like the factors that I considered at that point, right? The prestige of the college, the fact that it was in California, so there's proximity to the Bay Area, right? That was my reasoning at the time.
Right.
And then it turns out because the top two colleges that I was considering was UCSD and University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I was purely comparing these colleges in terms of their programs and their rankings and prestige and all that.
Mm.
But for my parents, then turns out weather also became a factor where they just did not want to send me to
Great.
Wisconsin-Madison.
Yeah.
So then that also played a role.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think I also had the same thing. Dream, matched, safety. I also kind of. So yeah, I think for me it was two important decision points. One
Mhm.
was that my friend, I think I've referenced this story in a podcast with Dhruvel as well. Like Kashish was
Mhm.
already here in Indiana University, and he was like pushing me, "You should come here. You should not go anywhere else." And I think that was one of my colleges to go to, and I got an admit from there. So I said, "Okay, let's not
Mhm.
do any more research. Let's go here because someone I know is already there, and we can, I think, probably figure out from there."
Mhm.
Now, I went when I was in my like I was going for my master's, so I kind of have completed my bachelor's.
Mhm.
And that age, when you're doing your bachelor's, right, it's where you are going through a lot of things, right? You are growing, you are kind of getting to a point, taking your own decisions. So, coming to a place like leaving India, you leaving your comfort zone, coming to United States, which is a completely different culture, completely different country, different scenarios, things could happen, right? So, how did you prepare yourself for it? Because I was afraid. I was like, oh, what will happen? Like it's completely new place. And how did you manage it?
It's a pretty loaded question. So maybe let me try to decouple it because I want to
Oh,
do justice to this.
great.
Um, so I moved to the US when I was 17. I
Okay.
was actually a class level ahead just because my parents sent me to preschool a year prior to others. I
Okay.
was 17 when I came here and stuff.
Got it. Okay.
And just to give you like brief background, I applied for engineering sciences at UCSD because of the traditional Indian mentality that I want to do engineering but don't know which kind.
And
I
then
got into that
science
major.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I got into that major. 10 days after my admission offer, that major got canceled from the university.
Wow.
Yeah, just got canceled. I just got an email, it's canceled. And now I'm a structural engineering major.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, let's figure this out, right? So turns out like they had the largest structural testing facility in the world, like very cool on campus. They
Yeah.
had the largest outdoor earthquake shake table in the world and all that, right?
Right.
So when I came to college, part of the struggle was also exploring this major. And then I had ultimately taken the decision that I can't see myself in this field and then had switched to data science. That's another topic. But
Right.
to address your question in terms of cultural differences, right? When I came here, aside from figuring out the major and the academic format here, of course, there were challenges with like settling into a new country far from home for the first time, pretty much. There were like challenges with roommates that I was navigating. I had a Chinese roommate and an American roommate. So I lived in a triple. So it was basically India, China, and US in the same room. Right? Which was very interesting. So there was that.
Right.
And but I think the by far the biggest cultural challenge that I faced was actually my conversational skills in English.
Yep.
I had massive trouble with English when I came here,
Mm.
so much so that I couldn't order at a restaurant because they wouldn't understand what I'm saying.
True. True. True.
I
Yeah.
thought I got it. So
Yeah.
I'm just
Right.
ordering my dish. And they're like, what was that? Like, sorry, what? Say
Yeah.
that one time.
Right.
And so I'm basically repeating my order 4 times for them to actually get it.
True.
Um,
True.
and this manifested in ways that I hadn't imagined, Praneeth,
Mm.
because it wasn't just like practical things like talking to a professor
Mm.
where
Yeah.
I would raise my hand, say the answer. I know I have the answer correct. They couldn't understand me. And
Yeah.
and they could understand some other person, some other American with that same answer and give
True.
them like verbal credit for it or whatever.
True.
Right.
True.
It wasn't just limited to that. It also kind of bled into my peer group,
Mm.
where there weren't a whole lot of Indians
Mm.
back at that time coming for undergrad.
Right.
And so, like, when you're talking about, like, unlike masters where everyone's an adult and so everyone's respecting you, right? And all
Mm.
that stuff. So they're used to it.
Right.
Like talking to like 17, 18-year-old kids, essentially, usually from the local area, who likely may not have met an international student before, was
Yeah.
not exactly like a very smooth experience.
True.
Because I could hear anything from like Apu from The Simpsons impersonation to like interesting ways of like characterizing the way
Right.
that I talk and all that stuff.
Right.
So that was by far the biggest challenge. And after a point, I basically realized that if I have to like be judged not by the way that I sound, but by the content of my speech, I
Yes.
probably have to really overhaul my conversational skills in English, both personally and professionally.
Right.
So that's also part of the struggle that I was navigating through. And
Right.
yeah.
I think you raised a very good way to show this cultural difference. I think a lot of see it in a way West versus East or West versus India, but it's more than that. And it's particularly about the way we sound and the way we understand what the others are saying.
Mhm.
I think I had the same problem, like because let's say if I'm going to a restaurant, I'm looking at a menu, I'm like, okay, I'm pronouncing it right, but they're not able to understand. Because
Yeah.
my accent is different, the way I'm speaking is different, right? On the other hand, I also learned, and I think this is something that people should understand, that Americans in general, I have seen are very patient, right? They will not just say, "Oh, I'm not able to understand. Go ahead, go ahead." They will
Mhm.
try to learn, like listen to you. They'll try to see what you're trying to say. I think which kind of helped me also say the content that I tell, right? In a manner which I'm still like my accent is, I don't think has changed, and I think I still try to speak the way I know how to speak.
Mhm.
But people try to understand. They don't try to rush over it, which is great, right? Because I've seen some people, even from India, they'll if they're not able to understand, they'll just move ahead. But I don't care. But that is something I think which kind of helps international students because if they have content, if they know what they're trying to say, the other person tries to listen to it, which is very important, right? Um, so that's a good thing. Now, I think apart from that, there is food. There's a lot of differences apart from that, which we definitely can cover. But I think a lot of people understand that now.
Mhm.
So research is something that has helped people understand the differences locally and internationally. And I think that kind of leads me to the next part, which is actually going through your course, right? Because you were in structural engineering, then you
Mhm.
found your way to DS or data science.
Mhm.
So how was that roadmap? Like, because coming from India just after your 12th, right? There are a lot of things you're trying to figure out in this country. And I think we covered one aspect of it, which is language problem, trying to make sure that the other person understands what you're saying. But apart from that, there is curriculum. I think the way we study here is very different from India, right?
Mhm.
So how did you figure that roadmap, and can you, if you can elaborate on that journey?
Yeah. So, of course, like, so I pretty much like tried to do as much research as I could online and talking to people in person, like current students and all that, in terms of trying to make sense of the academic system and what I have to do to succeed. And I kind of asked like so many questions that after a point, people could even like interpret it in a weird way. But I
Right.
guess 17-year-old me just didn't care. I just wanted answers. And
Yes.
so I basically, yeah, tried to like find stuff online, talking to people. And I guess the initial thing that helped me just purely academically before I come on to my major is that just because I got a 4.0 GPA in my first quarter,
Wow.
that was encouragement enough for me that I feel like I can figure out this system.
Mm.
Where if this amount of effort is leading to, say, like a perfect GPA for, say, like my first quarter, then
Right.
if I'm establishing that as the baseline, then I believe I can kind of come pretty close to like getting good grades in general. That
Wow.
psychologically helped me a lot
Mm.
in terms of navigating my academics. Now, in terms of the major, so yeah, so I was structural engineering. I took the first class.
Mm.
I also ended up doing well on it, but I just couldn't see myself working in that space.
Got it.
And data science was a new major that got introduced when I was a freshman.
Oh,
I had also gotten an email about it before I had joined that it's a new major that's being introduced.
right,
And I looked it up. It felt like super hype
right.
that the field is very emerging and all that, and it's very
Yeah.
new. And I knew that I loved math since high school.
Mm.
And I also knew that I want to ideally pursue something related to computer science,
Mhm.
just because like that's where the highest salaries are, kind of Indian mentality, pretty
Yeah,
much.
specifically.
So I
Yeah.
wanted to combine my interest in math with the industry requirement in computer science in some way.
Mm.
And fortunately, UCSD had a variety of computing oriented majors. And
Right.
so the top two that I boiled down to was one was a joint degree in math and computer science, and
Mm.
the second one was data science.
Okay.
And I took some online courses in data science just to kind of see what the work was like. I learned some basic Python, some basic modules in terms of like doing some basic analysis.
Mm.
I spoke to a whole variety of people, all from professors and academic advisors, upperclassmen, folks from the industry and career fairs and things, and ultimately decided that I like this work a lot and I can see myself doing it. So that's how I got into data science.
Got it.
And in terms of the major and how I navigated that major, so initially I had gotten like not a not the perfect grade in my first data science class. So there was, of course, like some amount of doubt that I had in my mind on like if this is the most basic class and I can't do super well on this, how will I navigate the major?
Mm.
The classes were brand new. And
Okay.
they also came from like data science department and CSE and math, but the data science core classes were brand new. So everyone was like basically like a guinea pig trying to figure this out for the first
Coding
time,
it.
right? So
Right.
there was a lot of uncertainty as well. Even
Mm.
more so as an international student when I'm paying international tuition and committing to this major. So
Makes sense.
in terms of how I navigated was basically like going to tutor hours and utilizing resources on campus,
Mm.
and then also trying to take initiative to get opportunities outside. So things then started to work from there. Yeah.
Makes sense. I think, yeah, because I think we had I think I had a very similar instance because so when I did my bachelor's in India, and I'm not saying that we don't get the complete picture of how the field is, but we mostly focus on theoretical part in India, right? What I've seen here is, and I think from what I gauged talking to you, that the courses here are more practical, right? You
Mm.
do more coding or maybe looking at the data, playing with it, and then understand what it is like, right? So when I came here, it was a shock for me because at that time, I think I started with Perl, Python, and I was like, okay, I know a little bit of Perl, but I can't do what is expected out of me in this project. So how would I do this? Maybe take an online course, maybe go to YouTube, learn about it, right? So I think, do you agree with the statement that the curriculum here in the United States is more practical or hands-on when compared to India?
Mhm. Yeah, let me give you a broad answer and then like the answer with my specific situation. So broadly what I've heard, at least say in like typical computer science majors, is that the feedback from like most upperclassmen was like compared to a practical internship,
Hmm.
they felt that there were fewer classes that were actually relevant in terms of what they were doing and also in terms of how to pass the interview.
Hmm.
That was one thing. Even though I'm sure that there's value to learning the other theoretical aspects of the major as well, right? To at least have some basic ground to stand on. But that was kind of like a mixed review that I still got from like Americans here and other people here.
Hmm.
That yeah, they definitely had like a more mixed and nuanced opinion. So it's not that things are ideal here either.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Definitely.
At the same time, with my major, I was so pleasantly surprised with how new and latest the
Hmm.
classes and the coursework was.
Hmm.
Initially UCSD had copied classes from UC Berkeley because even though Berkeley did not have a data science major, they had data science classes. So a lot of that content was getting adapted into the data science coursework here.
Hmm.
But within a few quarters, the college started cranking up its own coursework, which is very tailored. And it got so tailored to the point where not only were we learning the latest like tools and frameworks for doing stuff.
Mm,
The professor was like making new programming assignments from scratch based on what's out there.
mm,
There were also instances where with some famous like Python modules like scikit-learn, which is commonly used for like some basic data science tasks, there
mm.
were some experimental features that the creators of scikit-learn had released for like beta testing and early testing, and even that was included in our coursework.
Wow, that's
In
great.
terms of really learning the latest and greatest and kind of seeing how we can construct, say, more complex pipelines or more complex workflows with the kinds of pre-processing and analyses that we would want to do. And at the same time, this is something that most people did not like about the major, but I personally did a lot, which is that in our exams, at least like in our in-person exams for the first couple of years, right? We were also required to write code on a piece of paper. So
Oh,
we
wow.
were literally required to like memorize and know and write like all sorts of pandas transformations that we need and all forms of like API methods and everything. And we were supposed to write like code that would compile. That was the explicit expectation on the exam.
Wow.
People obviously hated it because no one wanted to memorize the API and all the methods and the return types and how to actually write absolutely perfect
Mm,
compilable code on paper. I felt it was great because it really gave me like very solid understanding on how to use these frameworks from scratch and also potentially help me in my interviews.
right.
But yeah, so it was like it was very brand new and kind of rigorous at the same time.
Wow. No, I think you're right because when you spoke about this writing this script on paper, I still remember that we used to have this algorithms class, right? So there were two important classes about like in bioinformatics. One is algorithms, like how these different algorithms work, and there is one where you find focus on sequence alignments and stuff, right? So and algorithms is a part of it. So I still remember like our professor used to say that okay, this is the problem. Let's say it's a Smith-Waterman algorithm. You have to solve it on paper. It's not like you can go and write a code on the let's say Sublime text or something and then paste it back for
Mhm.
the interpreter. Write it on the paper and solve it. And I think that is where actually you start thinking about knowing both the theory and the practical. You should know both the worlds really well, right? So yeah, I think that's what I would have imagined. So I think that's good to know. And I think one question that kind of, I think, gearing up and going into a little bit detail into your immigration and your current job and stuff. When you came here on your F1 to do your bachelor's, right? So when we come on master's and bachelor's, we only look into the aspect of, okay, we are here to study and then we'll figure it out, right? Did you had a plan? Okay, well, after my F1, I have to get an OPT, maybe an H1B or an O1, maybe ultimately in green card, right? So did you have that figured out, or was it something you were like, okay, we'll see how it comes and we'll figure it out later?
Yeah, definitely did not have that figured out because at least the attitude that my parents especially had was that let's just focus on education. Education is for we'll figure out everything else later, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there were challenges as well that I faced as any international student might as well. So I kind of quickly realized that, say, in the first 2 summers, even
Mm,
though I'm starting to get interviews, I did not get a single offer in the US to intern here.
mm,
So I had to, say, intern back in India.
mm,
And that initially raised some doubt in my head on, hey, can I actually get a job
mm,
related to my major that a company would pay me for in the US kind of thing?
yeah.
Or how much would it be a challenge that I'm an international student?
Mm,
There were also instances where in career fairs, I literally had, say, like more than one people kind of like they would have great conversations with me. And as soon as they would know that I'm an international student, they just wouldn't be able to help me. And I wouldn't completely blame them either because there's also company policies.
yeah.
It was especially kind of saddening to some part, at least to like the freshman, sophomore year of me, where I'd be standing in the line of a career fair. Some person, some engineer would kind of walk up to us and ask us for our immigration status. And
Mm,
if we were on a student visa, they were just like, we cannot sponsor you. You should get out of the line. It
mm.
was even so surprising when some of those people turned out to be first generation Indian Americans. So it was very interesting that like they had gone through the entire process and were basically telling us that they can sponsor us.
Right.
So that all happened as well, right? But then slowly and gradually, I started to really I tried to really up my game in terms of developing a brand
Mm,
and establishing credibility in terms of the initial brands that I still got to work with in India, in terms of the research that I pursued in college,
mm.
and in terms of almost spamming people on LinkedIn, just all around, trying to ask for referrals and ask for conversations and all that stuff. And things started to work from there.
Yeah, I think you kind of led to that point of networking, right? And I think I always say it in my post on LinkedIn whenever I speak on YouTube that networking is very essential, right? Whether you're looking for a job, an internship, or even for your green card, like sometimes you need people to maybe provide you letters, right? So networking is key. And I think a lot of people I talk to mine in my one-on-one consultation, they say, "Oh, well, I don't know. I only go for LinkedIn. I go to LinkedIn only when I need a job." I said, "That's the problem. You should be always on LinkedIn. Job is always something that will come along with your networking, right?" Like when I faced two of difficult situations, I think LinkedIn was my platform where I got, because of my networking, people already had something for me to start looking at, which generally doesn't happen with the market that you are in right now. And I think that's a great point. Like networking is something that people should start understanding the once they start into like bachelor's or maybe nearing the end of their bachelor's, start networking, start be on LinkedIn, talk about things, get perspective. So I think that's very important. So I think that brings to the other question, right? So immigration, right? Though US has a surplus amount of talent coming in from different parts of the world, immigration is something that they don't care much. It's not empowering. Like to be honest, we have gone through the process. I have gone through the process. It's not that it's easy peasy thing. It's more about, okay, there's a step by step hurdles. If you are able to cross them, well, good for you. If you're not able to cross them, we can't do anything. That's kind of a perspective that we get, or the answer we get when we talk to different people who have gone through the process, right? So when you realized, right, coming to the more of a, that's a story behind the question. So when you realized that, okay, now I have my F1, I'm almost about to graduate. Let's say you have your internship in the arsenal.
Mhm.
Now the time has come for looking at a job, a full-time
Mhm.
job.
Mhm.
Did you know how OPT works? Did you know what would be H1B? Did you know how O1 works? Like what was that? How did you manage that?
Yeah, so I initially had like a pretty hand wavy kind of
Mm.
notion about, okay, OPT is kind of a work authorization after I graduate. It would probably work for 3 years with STEM extension.
Right.
And sure, H1B is something that the employer would work on. So maybe I shouldn't worry about it right now.
Mm.
Really, the only thing that I, as a college student, was just prioritizing and micro optimizing for me was basically getting a job.
Got it.
And then I can figure things out after I get a job, kind of thing. So I had two internships in the US. And even with my summer internship after my junior year, I
Mm.
was supposed to get two different offers to choose from that company because I had also gotten into a rotation program with that company and all that stuff.
Mm.
And turns out they specifically had a policy. It seemed that they had a policy where they wouldn't sponsor international undergrads.
Oh.
And it was kind of very unusual because the team that I originally had gotten the internship offer from, it was from a particular company that had no sponsorship issues. They would sponsor everyone.
Mm.
And it's just that there was an acquisition that was going on where
Oh.
that company was getting acquired by a larger company, and the policies of the larger company were baked in such a way where they would sponsor all like master's, PhD students, which would be conventional, but they may not provide sponsorship to undergrads just yet, kind of thing.
Wow.
And so things kind of administratively worked in that way where I unfortunately wasn't able to receive an offer just because of my status and because of my degree level
Right.
as well in this case.
Mm.
And so that basically was kind of a big blow to me. And
Mm.
that basically brought me back to like level one of just looking for a job.
Mm.
And it took 9 months of like applying for like more than 700 positions because like I had them all tracked in my Excel sheet. So I even had statistics. Took me
Mm.
9 months, 700 jobs. For each job, I averaged 10 to 15 LinkedIn messages. Back in those days, I could send unlimited personalized messages on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So the number kind of increased to 8,000 or more. I interviewed with a little over 50 companies. Like I was in the process for more than 50 companies.
Right.
fortunate my resume was like built and branded in a way where I could still like get quite a few responses.
Okay.
And then from those processes of more than 50 companies, I ultimately got 3 offers towards the very end of my job search at the 9 month mark.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how it had
Wow.
initially. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think I had like I didn't I was not I didn't apply for 700 jobs, but I got an internship, I would always say by pure luck. Like,
Mhm.
okay, skills were always important, but what happened is that there was a position open in Eli Lilly, and my professor came into the lab. I was the only one at that time in the lab. He said, "Oh, did you apply for that internship?
Mhm.
Which internship?" He said, "Oh, there's an internship in Eli Lilly. You should open. You should go ahead and apply for it." I applied on the spot, and I think maybe something happened. I just got an email response the next day and saying that we would like to interview you. And I was like, okay, let's do this. I went to the interview rounds and all went to work. I started working for them. And I still think that maybe if I was not in the lab that day, maybe the professor must have emailed later, that for sure. But that first interview information that I got and I applied and used it to my advantage was kind of helpful, right? So I think sometimes immigration here is like luck. Finding a job is also a little bit of luck can help you, right? So that's a great way to put it, like how you applied to certain and tracked it. I think tracking is very important so that you know like how much success rate you have getting, which companies are more like responding to a request, which are not looking into your requests and stuff. So fast forwarding, you came to Microsoft, right? So you are right now a AI engineer, a machine learning engineer, right? And how is the journey in Microsoft? I think a lot of people share videos, and I see on YouTube a day in Microsoft or like that. So I want to know from you, like being there for 4 years or more, how was your experience working in Microsoft?
Mhm. Yeah, so I have been with Microsoft since summer of 2021, so it's been 3 years now.
Yes, yeah.
It's kind of been an experience that like unlike anything I would have ever imagined.
Mm,
Didn't even expect to like get into Microsoft at all, like straight out of undergrad.
mm,
So that's also kind of like a story in itself on like how I kind of did the interviewing process and how it turned out to have worked as well. And just like you, I had also utilized my professor's connections to
okay.
also kind of, in this case, get like an enhanced referral at Microsoft to enter
Right.
the interviewing process and
Yep.
things. So, of course, definitely appreciate the value of doing that as well.
Right.
Um, in terms of my experience at Microsoft, it was really groundbreaking for me, Praneeth,
Mm,
because for the first 2 years when I was in that rotation program, from my research, I could not find any other machine learning new grad rotational program in the industry, which
mm.
was a full-time job and which involved rotating across the entire company.
Wow.
Uh, because there are AI residency programs, but they're not full-time jobs. They're fixed-term contracts.
Okay.
There are other ML rotation programs that I have seen in other large tech companies, but either they would only be within a specific organization, not the entire company,
Mm,
or they would only hire engineers, for example.
right.
And the program that I joined would hire engineers and data scientists and PMs. So I got to work cross collaboratively as well.
Wow.
So, from my research, I just could not find any other program in the industry to do an apples to apples comparison with in terms of what this program offered. So it was very groundbreaking for me. It was especially reassuring that most of the people who joined that program had a master's or PhD
Mm,
degree. So they were out of a master's or PhD program,
right.
and I happened to be an undergrad. So it was also reassuring that even though I had only done my undergrad, I had majored in data science. I
Mm,
was dealing with specialized coursework from the get-go. And
mm,
so that really that really kind of reassured me that the industry is gradually starting to realize that undergrads can also do the work.
yeah.
So yeah, it was a great experience, like working and learning from all of those people, working on different projects, and even the reason that I'm so like still in with Microsoft and working in the area that I'm in is I just feel like there's so much potential for me personally to learn and grow as an engineer that I would really like to spend like enough time in whatever I'm working on and actually try to enhance the footprint of my impact
Mm,
and own more things from start to finish. And
Right.
I believe there's a lot of untapped potential there that I have yet to explore. So
Right. That's a very good way to, because when I talk to you, right, I one thing that I observe that I see a desire in you, right? A lot of people are working for Microsoft, but I'm not sure how many of them have the desire that I can see you. It seems that you want to bring impact. You want to do something which is impactful. And I think that is where the barriers of degrees don't kind of get resolved, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, I have a PhD, so I know more. That's not the case. If you have the desire to do something impactful, I think that degrees don't matter. It's more about how you achieve something and how hard you can work for it, right? So I think that desire I can see, and I'm pretty sure you will flourish in Microsoft and beyond. So that is something I can really see from my experience being in the field for almost 10 to 12 years now. And that kind of leads to the next part of the segment. So there are two more important segments we want to cover. Before the last one is, or the second last one is that immigration,
yeah.
how you see immigration, right? Because ultimately, most of the people who come here want to stay in the United States. We come with this ideology, and I also came with the same ideology that, well, I will come here for my master's. Once I finish my master's, I'll go back home and do something there. But what I realized while doing my master's is that the opportunities I want to work on, or the kind of uh, let's say bandwidth, or let's say the amount of what would the right word to put it? Maybe exposure. The exposure that I want to get in this niche or field would not happen back home. I should still like continue here. And I think this is a loop. Like once you get into your OPT, your H1, and then start juggling things, you don't want to kind of let's say leave, right? So did you also come with the same ideology? If yes, if no, what is your current plan now?
Yeah. So, in terms of my ideology and thought process, when I came to college, it basically felt like Disneyland to me.
Right.
That buildings look exactly as they do on like Google image search, for example. And like everyone seemed to be so friendly. And because of my interest in Model UN, I was also very interested in international issues and different cultures. And
Right.
so getting the opportunity to work with people of different backgrounds and cultures was also pretty remarkable to me.
Hmm.
Uh, and in terms of my job, at least what I wanted to do was get a good amount of experience here to at least jumpstart my career before I take any longer term moves.
Right.
Because the experience that I would get would be like carried with me throughout my life. And that is something that no one could take away from me, kind of thing.
Right.
So that was my initial kind of thought process as I went into this. And in terms of commenting on the overall, say, like immigration process, say for people who might want to come here and things like that, um, it is a complicated situation. Like there's just no other way around it or no way for me to say it any less than that. A lot of things from my experience and what I've also read and seen from other people's experiences, a lot of things have to work out in a favorable way for us to make progress
True. Yeah.
towards the process.
Mhm.
And oftentimes those things may not be exactly in our control. It just so happened, Praneeth, that I happened to have gotten the H-1B lottery in my first attempt.
Wow.
I
That's
joined in 2021. Sure, I got my offer too late, so they didn't apply for my lottery in 2021. That was also a luck factor. I just got my offer super late. But
right.
then also when they applied for it next year in 2022, I happened to have gotten it, despite the like not great odds of getting it, right? And
Right.
most people around me did not get it.
Hmm.
Also, um aside from like getting the lottery and all that stuff, of course I was thinking about backup options before I had gotten H&B, right? And fortunately I was very grateful that my employer seemed to be famous for kind of like transferring people to Canada or these countries,
Right.
so like Canada for example, and then kind of bringing them back into the US after a certain point of time,
Right.
probably on an L1 visa or something like that. And
Hmm.
so I was also very relieved that I at least had that safety net kind
Right.
of into the process
Hmm.
of what I would do in these different scenarios. So
Right.
thinking about backups was also very important in terms of these plans.
Right.
And even aside from getting my work visa, another important part of the process was getting the green card process initiated. And
Mm.
the intention with this, in my personal opinion, at least for Indian folks, is
Mm.
to lock in a priority date before
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
Because if you, soon as you lock in a priority date, first of all, I believe we can get unlimited extensions on the work visa. There's
Yeah.
also benefits like I believe for spouses, things like that.
Yeah.
And also, that kind of also like it feels like it can potentially shave off quite a bit of time in like the processing when you actually get to the end of the process kind of thing. So I'm just really grateful for the circumstances that I got to be part of and for the support that my employer has also provided to me
Right.
because my process was initiated from day one. Like they kind of sent me a questionnaire and there was an entire process. So I went through that process and they continually applied for me. And fortunately, my H-1B lottery, because it got approved in 2022, like it was kind of it was a streamlined process where I could
Mm.
get my I-140 approval when I already had my dual intent work visa and things
Right.
like that.
Right.
So things worked in a way that I hadn't really imagined that I kind of could lock in a priority date as early as I kind of physically could, it
Right.
seemed. And so, yeah, I'm just very grateful to that while realizing that not everyone might exactly have gone through this process exactly in this way. Yeah.
Makes sense. And I think we before we started talking on the podcast, you mentioned that you are on EB3, right?
Yes.
Right. So, like, any plans to like? I kind of talk about EB1. A lot of influencers talk about EB1 and stuff, right? We kind of cover how people can move to EB1 and maybe have a green card sooner. So, anything in future you want to go after EB1 or maybe thinking about going after it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, like, after I locked in my priority date, I
Mm.
had to, unlike most of my friends and other people around me, say in other companies, I had the sudden liberty to think about what my future options or next plans of action would look like.
Mm.
And so as I kind of looked at possible options, right? It looks like EB1 is one of the ways. Another way could be EB5, and there's these
Yeah.
other kinds of ways in which people can kind of navigate this process faster, especially
Mhm.
for folks born in India.
Right.
So fortunately, I am in that mindset where I can at least learn more, start learning more about these options.
Makes sense.
I think the good part is that I'm not exactly in a hurry per se. One, because I don't have any family responsibilities.
Mm.
Two, because I have already locked in my priority date, so that's supposed to not change.
Right.
And so I can still kind of gradually make progress towards learning more about these options and kind of seeing. However, I want to
Right.
align things in a way to avail any of those options as well. So yeah.
Right. No, that's great, and I think I wish you luck in any endeavor that you pursue. And as I said, you have that desire, so anywhere you will go, you'll try to make impact, whether it's immigration or whether it's in the tech. And I think that kind of leads to our last segment, where there are two important questions I want to ask you. Right. The first one is a two-part question, so take your time on it. Elaborate as much as you can because this can help a lot of people.
Mhm.
The first part is that you think that US still, and I think this is the question I ask everyone on the podcast.
Mhm.
So do you think, and I have got, again, to give a preface, I have got very mixed answers on this. So the more we cover this, I think we will get a better understanding.
Mhm.
So do you still think US is that dreamy, dreamy place to come to? That's the first part.
Yeah. There's obviously lots of perspectives on this.
Mm.
Of course, talking to my friends here, friends in India, even hearing stuff like I believe the CEO of a large tech company had even said that if they had graduated today, they might not have visited the US, right?
Mm.
I think the good part is that a lot of the I think the good part is that a lot of the what do we call it? A lot of the differences in careers
Mm.
between the US and India, it feels is gradually decreasing, which is amazing news
Yeah.
because a lot of like large tech companies in their operations, they likely have like massive operations, if not compatible with the US and India, right? So India still feels like one of the best places to work professionally,
Mm.
to have very similar equivalent opportunities. So
Mm.
these differences are really decreasing, it seems, and that's a really amazing thing,
Mm.
especially for people who are already in India who are contemplating to move back. So that's great. There are also other perspectives related to people comparing the cost of living adjustments with the salary in the US versus India. One of the more common examples might be the San Francisco Bay Area versus
Mm.
Bangalore. And people also have logical reasonings to show scenarios in which their lifestyle in Bangalore might be better.
Mm.
Uh, for
True.
example, with the domestic help and the family support and these kinds of support that they could kind of leverage.
Right.
So that is all there, and it's really glad to see that we have kind of these solid options as well. And it's not that we have to stay at some place forever. We can still kind of go back and forth in this globalized world.
Mm.
At the same time, there are other intangibles, for example, related to quality of life, that
Mm.
are also really important considerations.
Right.
Because if you talk about intangibles like air quality,
Mm.
especially with someone like me who was raised near New Delhi,
Gurgaon, yeah. Yeah.
and other intangibles like quality of life, or interacting with people of really diverse cultures and backgrounds, and yeah, things like that, then there are also still differences that might still exist.
Mm.
And one of the things that I had also thought about when it came to just plain old quality of life, or kind of like the environment,
Mm.
the amount of nature that I might have access to, and things like that. There's also like some interesting visions that say the Indian government might have in terms of really making India a developed country and all that, say by 2047, and these kinds of visions.
Right.
Part of these visions in terms of infrastructure and foreign relations, some things that I personally care about a lot, seem to be getting good progress on, in my opinion. And
Mm.
at the same time, even if we say that India becomes like a developed country in the truest sense of the word in terms of quality of life and infrastructure and everything by 2047, even if that happens, if that is the vision,
Yeah.
I might be 47 years old when that happens. And so the way that I'm just trying to really soak in all this info and trying to consolidate this into like logical steps to
Mm.
actually see what the status is and what the difference points are. And
True.
so if like the majority of my youth is going to be spent by the time that India has parity in certain aspects, right? Those are also factors that people might want to consider, right?
Mm.
So I'm not saying necessarily, to answer your question whether it's exactly a rosy place to be in or not. I would say that the differences are decreasing.
Mm.
There are differences that still exist. And it's a matter of proportions, really, and the ways that you think about it and construct your arguments.
Right.
The reason I'm giving this tan baby response to you right now, Praneeth, is because I did model UN back in high school. And so I can talk both for and against the motion. And that is something I'm very proud of. But
Definitely.
yeah, but in terms of, yeah, whether the US is a rosy place to come in my personal experience, with the things that I have experienced in my college, research, in my job,
Mm.
and with the kind of social circle that I've been provided with the things that I've learned, definitely in these kinds of areas, I personally feel like there's a lot that is to be gained and learned
Mm.
by being in a place like the US, for example.
Sure.
Um, and so, yeah, these are things that people can still experience both sides of the coin and still be able to like go back and forth and really prioritize what they're looking for in their lives.
No, that's a very great way to put it. I think I can could see that you mentioned the very beginning of the podcast that being in the Model United Nations, you and being your father as an attorney, as a lawyer, you know how to structure arguments. And I think certain elements of that structure I really loved because you mentioned that, well, by the time India becomes developed, and I want India to be developed as soon as possible, right? That's what my aim is and hope is. And if it happens in 2047, you will be like, let's say, 40 years old or 47 years old. So that is the time where you would start thinking about your retirement rather than maybe creating impact, right? I think in a general sense, maybe I'm not saying that people cannot make impact after their 40s. They can, but they also have a tendency to kind of get slow down, relax, enjoy the rest of their life, right? So I think that's a very good way to put it. And I hope, I wish India becomes developed. And I think there's some really great work being done. And I think, as you mentioned, the difference is getting squeezed in, which is great because the more equal it becomes, the better people can make decisions on it, right? So that's a great way to put it. And I think the second part of the question is, and I think this is also a question I try to once ask everyone. I also ask myself at different points of time. What could you have done differently from your current journey? And what that difference would be and how it would have impacted your journey so far?
Mhm. In terms of differences
Mm,
and how that could have impacted things, maybe I can club these into like both professional areas and personal areas.
mm,
So, starting with professional areas, one thing that I personally would have liked to do better was to um, build relationships with my former colleagues and be able to sustain them
okay.
in the sense of like being in touch with them and trying to see if I can sort of like meet them in person or keep them updated on my progress. I
Mm,
had 4 internships in college,
mm,
and I got to work with a lot of really great, talented people. I
right.
got to be in touch with some of them, but not necessarily all of them. So,
Mm,
in terms of navigating the communication after the internship is done, not just for any future opportunities, but also for really building a solid network,
mm,
this is kind of the foundation, say, for a college student to really try out
right.
and try to simulate how they can build better networks with the people that they're working with
Mm,
so that they can carry on those skills when they move into their full-time job and stuff like that.
right.
There are places where I believe that I could have kind of performed better in terms of holding on to those
Mm,
relationships and things like that. So that's definitely one on the professional side. Um, and I believe like in part of my college journey, there was also immaturity on my side in
mm,
terms of thinking that if I got one interview, oh, I'm definitely going to get one offer because I passed the initial rounds and things like that.
right.
And that is also not how it works. Like it is never a yes until I have a physical offer letter in my hand, kind of thing. Because things have happened in a way in the job search process where even verbal confirmations sometimes would not exactly pan out in that way. And there were some red flags that I also detected, and I
Mm,
felt like I did not initially know, but
yeah.
should have avoided. So, really being very clear with intentions,
Mm,
making sure that we have things on paper to actually say yes to,
mm,
not putting our eggs in one basket, and also even doing the due diligence as hard as it seems for international college students
mm,
to still ask about sponsorship options and to still ask if they can at least kind of say work after they graduate,
right.
for example, with them, at least for the specified time and things like that, are
Mm,
some very important considerations. Otherwise, like they might just end up repeating the process after a point.
mm,
So I feel like in college, it's easy to be myopic on just getting a job, but having some broader sense of where you want to take things
right.
is probably a solid step
Mm,
in terms of how to kind of go about navigating this process and also building your personal brand. So this is something definitely on the profession side. And of course, there's other things related to me learning, even typical engineering skills, not just ML and AI. Because to operationalize like these models, a lot of typical engineering skills and typical software considerations are also needed.
right.
So not ignoring the foundational skills just in favor of something that looks shiny. That is also something that it's very easy for
Yeah.
college students and early career professionals to really just double down into
Right.
than the traditional skills that are still very important to be learned to actually operationalize and productize something.
Right.
So both kinds of skills really need to go hand in hand, and it doesn't look like there's a shortcut to that in my experience.
True. True.
This is on the professional side. On the personal side, um, I felt like my college journey, in a way, and I probably haven't spoken about this on record before,
Mm.
part of my college journey did feel like an isolating experience, not in a bad way, because I was just so focused on like what I wanted to do and the kinds of opportunities that I wanted to get. But as a result, I probably did not, even though I have some great friendships from college, I feel like I could have done even better in terms of building even more long-lasting relationships with the people around me and the people that I worked with in classes, to also, again, kind of like bolster my network and things like that. And
Right.
so, in a way, like I was doing a lot of opportunities, going to a lot of events just by myself. So it was just like me and like whatever I wanted to do. So it was a very kind of specific focus view.
Right.
Though it worked out well professionally, I
Mm.
do feel that there were quite a few more social skills that I
Mm.
would have loved to know personally in terms of developing rapport with people,
Right.
um, and kind of developing like more deeper relationships where we can help each other and be resources to each other. I had the fortune of making some progress on this personally after COVID happened, because a lot of the international students, for example, were here. And so I got to interact with them more so than
Mm.
others. But before COVID, I pretty much wouldn't interact with any friend on a daily basis per se. It would all just be like more occasional, kind of more surface level interactions relatively.
Mm.
That is definitely one personal consideration. Another one, to be brutally honest, so this is an anecdote, and it's kind of unusual, and maybe a regret. I don't know. Take it however you may. This was sophomore year. I was walking in college. I saw like a notice board, and there was actually this organization that was interfacing with the international students office, and I
Mm.
believe they were offering accent reduction classes. And they were basically offering like classes and workshops on how we can like refine the mouth movements of our English to actually sound clearer and all that.
Mm.
Going through the process of learning the mouth movements of like English pronunciations and words and how to actually get our points across, how to emphasize on the right places,
Mm.
really took me years to get to a point where I became more satisfied with it.
Mm.
But another kind of like point in my head was that if I had gotten formally educated in this level of English, or say in American English or whatever,
Right.
personally that would have made my life quite a
Easy.
bit easier than me technically like using Google all the time and going to like dictionaries, and really kind of learning the right set of
Right.
skills and going to YouTube videos to really do everything from scratch by myself.
Mm.
That's a very personal sort of thing that I wish I had improved upon.
Mm. No, that's a great summary, like great summary of uh, points that you mentioned. I think there's a lot to learn from it because I think a lot of individuals go through the same process, right? And like for example, networking is one, interpersonal skills is the other. English accent, maybe like taking a class, or maybe if you want to really come here, maybe understanding how phonetics works could be really essential, right? Again, it's not something that you require because you can always learn on the go. But I think the way you put it, it makes complete sense. And I think I also, whenever I talk to international students, I think I got a lot of DMs from people saying, "Oh, should I join this college? How should I go after my coursework and stuff?" And I try to help as much as I can. One thing I always tell people when I meet them in person. So my brother-in-law is also studying in Canada, his bachelor's in psychology, and I tell him that apart from studying, one thing that you should definitely do is explore the country, make friends, and also find a job on campus. Because I think these are the things which can help you grow a lot. Because when you know a country in more depth, first of all, you'll have more to speak about it, right? Have more open mind to learn about it. And I think one thing that I learned over the campus job is you meet different people, you get a different perspective, whether it's research assistantship, whether it's teaching assistantship, any kind of jobs could be very helpful in kind of defining the scope of how would your interpersonal skills will develop, right? So yeah, I think that's great. And I think coming to the very end of this podcast, I think I really loved talking to you, getting to know your journey and how you navigated through all these different situations. Um, One thing that I saw in your profile which really stood out, like it says 25 and 25, and we'll talk about that. And I think you mentioned that you have been speaking at different events. You have a lot of YouTube videos where you already spoke in different public gatherings and stuff. So how all of that came together, right? That's the first part. And second part is, what is your final advice to anyone who's listening to this podcast, maybe wants to come to United States, make a career in data science or AI or machine learning? So how would you summarize that?
Gotcha. That's a very loaded question. Let me decouple that and address that one after the other. So, one on how one on I think like how the 25 under 25 stuff.
Mhm.
Another one on how I basically got involved in these speaking engagements.
Mhm.
And then the other one, advice for people who want to come to the US and then like build their profile and things, right? So first, for the 25 under 25 like title and so usually when people ask me, I just say it's clickbait. But so like the actual story is that there was this one like organization who wanted to like write about people in this space and who wanted to feature people.
Mhm.
And I think like one of the writers of that article was someone that I knew. And so they had kind of also reached out to me saying that, hey, we vetted a lot of profiles and your profile looks great. And we're looking to feature like young people in the space because like under 25. So
Mhm.
this was back in 2020. So it's been a while.
Mhm.
But they were like, hey, like, yeah, like, can I feature you kind of thing? And so that's how it kind of organically had worked. And I guess like putting that title on the profile, one, because like I'm still technically under 25, but two, because again, it helps with clickbait, right?
Yeah.
It kind of helps with like getting more hits on your profile. And the way that like LinkedIn is constructed and the algorithm and how to kind of optimize for these things, some of that does help to at least get more eyesight on your profile
Right.
to actually like enable people to scroll down and kind of learn more about my experience so that I can get aligned with opportunities in the right way. Because fortunately, I did kind of get several opportunities organically through LinkedIn, including those speaking engagements, which I will come to now, where people saw me working in specific fields and they
Mhm.
thought that I could talk about certain things.
Got it.
Um, so that was there. In terms of the initial motivation for wanting to speak
Mhm.
online, because that's also another like kind of activity which can seem a little nerve-wracking,
Mhm.
was my dad would speak pretty much at all sorts of events, and so many people would come to watch him. So it was
Mhm.
like the very base desire was my dad speaks at all of these events. I want to do that too.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so all kind of came from like looking at him as a role model. He works in the corporate world. I want to do that too. He speaks at all these kinds of events and gets like honored with all these kinds of awards. I want to do that too. And so that's how like my initial motivation started. And with that, I felt that I also thanks to Model UN, I also like to explain things in a way that hopefully is easier for people to understand. It also brings me great joy if I'm able to like help other people in any way I can with my experience.
Mhm.
And so with that, I initially kind of started talking about like my college experience and all of that, and then gradually also shifted to talking about the industry and
Mhm.
current trends, and like AI and all that stuff.
Mhm.
So, and I also feel like I'm obviously going to make mistakes as I get started on this stuff,
Yeah.
but it's only when I continually talk to people in these kinds of settings that I can also get to refine how I communicate and bring my points across. And hopefully, this is something that can help me better in the longer run in
Mhm.
terms of my communication. So I guess really it's a combination of things, both
Mhm.
from my motivation from my dad
Mhm.
to me wanting to help others and explain stuff with Model UN to even refining my conversational skills in English, for example, all kind of bled into the way where I wanted to kind of be public with these engagements and also enhance my personal brand.
Yeah.
Now, coming to advice that I might have for people who want to come to the US, get started in the AI space. So, one perspective is that, like, if you're able to get admitted to like a top US college, maybe in the top 100 rankings, something like that, it's um, it's probably one of the best educational avenues there are with the density of opportunity that you can have around you and the kinds of people from diverse backgrounds that you can get to work with. It is important to think a little bit about what you might be looking for the longer term, because if you're looking to settle into a new place or something, there are other countries as well that have more favorable processes.
Yeah.
But there are also trade-offs with the kinds of opportunities, compensation. There's a whole bunch of these factors. For someone who wants to come into the US, the density of opportunities I felt was great, barring the global economic recession that I guess everyone is facing right now. And I really kind of like to be closer to where the innovation is happening in a way, because that way I can really be more updated with what's happening and I
Mm.
can really immerse myself into the ecosystem. And so that really brings me to whatever like advice that I have for people who want to come in. It is really critically important to
Mm.
immerse yourself into the ecosystem here,
Right.
both in terms of interacting with people of different countries and backgrounds, to also like exploring research on campus and other kinds of opportunities, really making sure that, say, for people coming in their undergrad, they might not do anything for the first couple of summers. I would really highly encourage them to do that.
Right.
That has benefits beyond anything they can imagine, not
Yeah.
just professionally, but also, for example, for my green card process, I
Mm.
could initiate it and I was eligible because of the amount of experience that I had that made it easier to argue through the initial steps of the process.
True.
I just didn't know that, right? There was no way for me to know that almost.
Yeah.
But really immersing yourself into the ecosystem here, getting as many opportunities as you can.
Mm.
And even after your job, it does not mean that your professional personal growth just gets starts and ends with your job.
Mm.
There's a whole bunch of things you can do in the area, attending events, speaking at places, doing whatever you feel passionate about. And you can start with that,
Mhm.
um, to actually see how you can make the best use of your time here, regardless of wherever you go. And so it's not just a pipeline of pursuing a degree and getting a job. It is the entire ecosystem, and it is about how you kind of make the best use of all the opportunities around you, um,
Very true.
to actually like make kind of a personal dent in this space, or to actually create some sort of impact, and to actually like
Yeah.
develop yourself as a younger professional. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I completely resonate with what you said because I think this is the land of opportunity, and it is true in most aspects, right? Definitely, every country has problems. US has its own problems. But I think once we come here, and if we come here with a passion of really making an impact, the opportunities are endless. I think that's what I have learned till now. Definitely, immigration kind of stops you at exploring multiple avenues, but like going out, speaking at events, meeting people, networking, that immigration doesn't stop you from that. And I think that is something where you can really make an impact. Right? So, with that, I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast, taking out time from your schedule. And I'm pretty sure this story of yours, this journey of yours, would definitely help a lot of people. First of all, understand what are the nitty-gritty problems that one has to face, how to make a career in Microsoft, for example, you have, and maybe answer some questions that they are dealing with. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm really excited, really loved talking to you today.
Thanks so much for having me, Praneeth. This was a lot of fun, and I really hope that some of this content is relevant and beneficial for your audience as well. But yeah, just had a lot of fun. So thanks a lot for having me.
Same here. Thank you.